News making headlines this hour. South and North Korea has agreed to reunite this month hundreds of family members separated by the Korean War in what will be the first such reunions in more than 3 years. President Park Geunhye begins to receive a series of annual policy briefings from ministries and other key government offices to hear their detailed plans on achieving her policy goals. Plus, the Olympic flame finally arrives in Sochi 2 days before the grand opening of the 2014 Winter Olympics after being relayed by 14,000 torch barriers. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Wednesday, February 5th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, it's been a long time coming, but the two Koreas today reached an agreement on when to hold the next round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War.
They are set for the third week of February, and if they go ahead as planned, they'll be the first reunions in more than 3 years. Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
After just 4 hours of discussions, the two Koreas agreed on Wednesday to resume the long-suspended reunions for families separated by the Korean War.
The Koreas have agreed to hold a round of family reunions from February 20th to the 25th at Mount Kumgang.
The divided family members selected for last year's canceled reunions will take part, with 100 South Koreans meeting with their loved ones in the first round and another 100 North Koreans taking part in the second round. A team of South Korean engineers will cross the border on Friday to check on facilities at the Mount Kumgang resort, and a South Korean delegation will follow 5 days ahead of the event. The planned reunions coincide with South Korea's annual joint military exercises with the United States, which run from late February through April. North Korea had earlier warned that the humanitarian event could not take place during the military drills, and experts had pointed to the possibility of the North making a counter-proposal on the reunion dates. However, the upcoming drills were not a major issue during the talks.
There was no specific mention by North Korea of the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills, nor a call for the military exercises to be canceled during the talks.
Regarding North Korea's last-minute cancellation of a round of family reunions last year, the ministry said the two sides agreed that such an incident should not happen again. Millions of Koreans were separated by the Korean War more than 6 decades ago, and considering their ages, the time to see their loved ones one last time is running out. The two Koreas agreed to meet for another round of Red Cross talks following the family reunions to discuss a wide range of humanitarian issues, which includes holding the family reunions on a regular basis. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The two Koreas may be making progress in improving their frayed relations, but just a sliver of hope remains now of realizing a nuclear-free peninsula.
Our Connie Kim reports on the continuous advancements in Pyongyang's nuclear programs and its refusal to abandon them.
The United States has once again firmly laid out its demand that North Korea take the initial steps towards denuclearization in order to resume the six-party talks. At a press briefing in Washington Tuesday, Daniel Russell, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, said talks with North Korea should focus on denuclearizing the Korean peninsula and should not be talks for talk's sake. He also said Washington stands ready to negotiate with Pyongyang, but only on the basis of a statement signed in 2005. Under the landmark deal, Pyongyang agreed to scrap its nuclear program in return for security, economic, and energy benefits. However, the North failed to abide by the agreement, carrying out 3 nuclear bomb tests between 2006 and 2013. Russell's comments echo those made by Glenn Davies, the U.S. envoy on North Korea, who said last week that the six-party denuclearization talks will not resume unless Pyongyang changes its policy direction. The U.S. and North Korea remain at odds as Pyongyang has not shown any change in its position in recent years. Speaking in Moscow on Tuesday, the North Korean ambassador to Russia said the chance of resuming the talks was fading away because of Washington's hostile policy towards the North. The six-party talks involving the two Koreas The US, China, Japan, and Russia have not been held since late 2008. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
As she enters her second year in the nation's top office, President Park Geunhye started her check-in with government ministry officials on this Wednesday for a clearer picture on the nation's direction.
For the next 20 days, she will be briefed on their detailed plans to achieve her policy goals. Our presidential office correspondent, Oh Jin-ju, has more.
How well have government ministries and offices performed the tasks set by the Park administration over the past year? The Office for Government Policy Coordination handed in report cards to President Park on Wednesday for the first time in government history. Out of the 140 listed tasks, 21% were said to be on the right track, 60% received satisfactory marks, and around 20% got poor grades. Now, as for categorizing the tasks into President Park's 4 major goals, the government did well in laying the foundation for a peaceful reunification last year, receiving high marks in 41% of the related tasks, while it got the poorest grades for tasks related to economic revitalization. Topping the evaluation list were the ministries of Defense, Gender Equality, and Foreign Affairs. Based on the evaluations, each ministry is required to submit plans to enhance their performance for 2014 sometime this month. During the first day of the government status reports, President Park put great emphasis on 2 things: getting rid of unnecessary regulations and normalizing abnormal practices and policies. She ordered ministries to determine the difficulties companies are facing and to devise methods to help them, for example, by capping the total number of regulations. The president also called on ministries to work towards eliminating lax management in the public sector and establish laws to root out corruption. The ministries and offices will be separated into 9 groups based on the issues they deal with to give their status reports. President Park says this is designed to reflect her emphasis on cooperation among related ministries in reaching her administration's key policy goals. The status reports will run through February 24th. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
And staying at Cheongwade, President Park Geunhye's office named its new spokesperson, former newscaster Min Kyung-wook.
Min started his career as a reporter at KBS in 1991 and has since served as the TV station's Washington correspondent and the main anchor of its flagship news program. He met with reporters Tuesday afternoon and said he would do his best to communicate with the press so that the Park administration can enhance its communications with the public. The appointment comes about a month after former presidential spokesperson Kim Hwang resigned, citing personal reasons. Following his ruling party counterpart's speech on Tuesday, the head of the main opposition Democratic Party delivered his own keynote speech at the National Assembly on this Wednesday.
Kim Han-gil vowed to reform politics and push to narrow the gap between the haves and have-nots. Our Kim Han-ji has the details.
Addressing the full assembly and members of President Park Geunhye's cabinet on Wednesday, Democratic Party chief Kim Han-gil said his party will be at the forefront of reforming parliament and party politics.
We will push for the passage of our bill aimed at preventing lawmakers from abusing their privileges. For this, we will work towards setting up an independent ethics committee that can keep a watch on lawmakers and execute the contents of this bill.
Earlier this week, the Democratic Party leadership issued a political reform proposal that centers around scrapping the privileges of lawmakers and includes having all lawmakers report to an independent ethics committee their plans for overseas travel and commemoration ceremonies for the publication of their books. Kim also called for a rigorous reform of the parliamentary system itself. Specifically, he proposed having the parliament open year-round, operating the parliament's budget committee at all times, and constantly carrying out a parliamentary audit of the government. Kim said his party will fight the government's downsized basic old age pension plan, saying President Park must fulfill her original pledge to give all senior citizens aged 65 and above 200,000 won or $185 every month. He also said his party opposes the government's policy to allow hospitals to form for-profit subsidiaries. saying the healthcare sector should be made more public, not less. He stressed that reunification with North Korea is not something that can be obtained overnight.
President Park said reunification will be like a jackpot that has created a rosy fantasy that reunification will come easy and quickly. I am concerned about this situation.
Saying the public needs to agree on how to prepare for a peaceful reunification with North Korea, the Democratic Party chief called for the establishment of a preparatory body comprised of the government, lawmakers, and civic leaders. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
The recent turbulence in the global economy has spread from vulnerable emerging markets to major economies like the U.S. and Europe.
And this is fanning worries here in Korea as to whether the country is strong enough to weather the storm. Our Yu Lian has more.
Is Korea headed for a crisis along with other emerging market economies, or will it differentiate itself from the rest of the pack? The benchmark Kospi closed at a 5-month low on Tuesday, and offshore investors sold a net $1.4 billion worth of Kospi stocks in January. Despite the major sell-off, however, Korea still seems on a different path from that of developing economies.
The struggling developing countries all have something in common: current account deficits, budget deficits, and political turmoil. Korea, in contrast, is relatively free from political strife and has healthy economic fundamentals that make it stand in stark contrast to those countries.
During the huge stock sell-off in January, foreign funds flowed into the bond market, $1.6 billion worth, which is some $200 million more than the amount they sold in the stock market. Korea's credit default swap premium for its sovereign bonds, which shows a country's default risk, also stands much lower than that of other emerging market economies, at 75.5. This is compared to India's 275.4 and Indonesia's 235.2. Korea also has an ample amount of foreign currency reserves, as it has posted current account surpluses for the past 24 months. On top of that, there's Korea's large foreign exchange reserves, which hit a record high of $348 billion last month. Experts say that given its strong economic fundamentals, it is highly unlikely that Korea will be hard hit by the crisis hitting developing countries. But since foreign investors do hold a large amount of Korean stocks and bonds, the hint of a crisis could cause a major market shakeup this year. Yu Lian, Arirang News.
And for an expert's take on the sharp pullback in global equity markets and heightened volatility, we bring in Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Yang, help us understand the reason behind the recent movement in currencies and equities worldwide, and whether you see this as a momentary blip or a deepening market correction.
Okay, I see this as sort of a combination of three factors. The first is we have the tapering. Now, quantitative easing on this scale and for this length has something that we've never seen before in modern economic times. And then the second factor is some emerging economies do have some serious problems. Argentina comes to mind. Now, you also have other economies like India, Indonesia, Turkey. Some variables look very bad. Some variables look okay. In normal times, I think they could have weathered through these type of problems without too much of a problem, but because we're in this nervous era, I think those problems are getting overblown in some ways. And then the third factor is that the United States recovery hasn't been as fast as people expected.
Well, we saw a slight bounce in emerging market currencies today. And speaking of all of that anxiety, do you think we are on the verge of another Asian financial crisis like the one that we had in 1997?
Well, if you look at the numbers, we shouldn't. We have for Korea, Korea has a large foreign exchange reserve. We've been running current account surpluses. We have been running government budget deficit if you look at it widely. If you look at it narrowly, then we're still in surplus, but if you look at it widely, including all the debt for public corporations that the government guarantees, then we're slightly in the negative. But our debt to GDP ratio isn't that bad. So if you just look at the numbers, we should be able to weather this without a problem.
How likely will the troubles in the so-called Fragile Five? You mentioned a few earlier, but Turkey, India, South Africa, and Indonesia and Brazil, in fact, other developing countries.
Okay, well, I should mention that it's interesting that the problem country seems to be changing. Early last year it was India, then the summer last year it was the Fragile Five countries, which include India, and then late last year it was Turkey, Indonesia, and Thailand, and then this year it's Argentina. So again, I think it's every bad news that you get seems is going to be amplified because everybody's so nervous. But the Big Five countries, I don't think the crisis, if it happens, will go on to regional levels. It'll just be affecting one or two countries.
And considering the highs and lows, what measures should the South Korean government take to minimize the risk on the country's financial health?
Okay, well, Korea has taken a lot of measures already, and that's been, at least from if you hear the international investors and international economists, they seem to be working very well. We have limited the positions that domestic banks can take for short selling Korean won. So that should cut down on the foreign exchange rate fluctuations. We've started imposing taxes on bond returns to foreigners. Previously, we had exempted them from tax, but now we included them in the tax rate. We'll see exactly how well they work, but they've been around for about 2 or 3 years, and the domestic economists, as well as international economists and international investors, believe that those measures are working very well.
All right, well, let's hope that they do. Thank you so much for your insight tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to maneuver, trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
The Korean government is planning to do more to foster provincial universities over the next 5 years. The Education Ministry announced that it would dedicate over 1 trillion won, or roughly $930 million as part of a 5-year plan to improve universities located outside of urban areas. About 60 to 70 universities are expected to benefit from the program, which starts this year. The ministry will accept applications until the end of April, and the universities will be selected in June. It added that admissions at the participating schools will be cut by 20,000 at most. New visa rules for foreigners wanting to marry and live in Korea will be enforced beginning in April. They'll have to prove they have basic Korean language skills by either passing a language test or completing a language course. As for the Korean partner, he or she will only be eligible to marry a foreigner in Korea if they earn an annual income of roughly $14,000, which is more than 120% of the minimum cost of living. The Ministry of Justice says the rules are intended to address social problems that arise from international marriages, including domestic violence due to communication difficulties or a lack of ability to financially support the family.
With just 2 days to go before the Sochi Winter Olympic Games open on Friday evening local time, the Olympic flame made its way into the host city on Wednesday, and Team Korea held an entrance ceremony at the Olympic Village. For all the latest, our Olympics correspondent Song Ji-sun reports.
After traveling some 65,000 kilometers, climbing mountains, plunging into a lake, and even making its first journey into space on a Russian spacecraft, the Olympic flame arrived in Sochi on Wednesday, ending a 4-month journey. The identity of the final torchbearer is still under wraps, but we do know that the torch will be lit at the main stadium on Friday evening during the opening ceremony. Team Korea held a welcoming ceremony at the Olympic Village on Wednesday, vying once again to finish in the top 10 in the medal count for the 3rd consecutive Winter Games. Seoul is sending its largest number of winter sports athletes to the Games, with 71 on the roster. There were headlines off the ice as well on Wednesday. It was confirmed that Park Geunhye will become the first UN chief to give a keynote speech to International Olympic Committee's General Assembly this week before attending the opening ceremony on Friday. However, other prominent world leaders, including the presidents of the United States, France, and Germany, will not attend, all taking stands against Russia's anti-gay laws. At the opening speech of the General Assembly Wednesday, IOC President Thomas Bach slammed politicians for using the Sochi Olympics as a political platform on the backs of the athletes. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Most South Koreans believe Team Korea will finish the Sochi Winter Games ranked in the top 10 in the medal count.
Stephen Che joins us with the details. Hello there.
Hey guys, a new poll shows that 8 of 10 Koreans expect the nation to finish within the top 10 in medals, and with the nation's largest delegation heading to the Olympics, it's well within reach. Now, the poll by Gallup Korea also revealed that about 30% of people believe South Korea could finish in the top 5, like in Vancouver 4 years ago. Now, the nation's stated goal in Sochi is for a top 7 finish with at least 4 gold medals. And meanwhile, many are anticipating Kim Yeona's quest for back-to-back figure skating golds, with 63% of respondents saying they expect a golden finish there. And in the same poll, about a third of Koreans said a gold would come from speed skating, but you'd think it'd be higher with the men's and women's 500-meter champions taking the ice. I'm talking about defending gold medalists Mo Tae-bum and Lee Sang-hwa. Well, they decided to have a 50-meter race during training to see who was faster. And with Lee given a 4-meter handicap, they split 2 races 1-1. But the real tests for them will come next week on Monday and Tuesday. Now let's get to Wednesday's top matches. Starting in the KBL, the Orions beat the KGC 76-66. But now let's go to the game of the night. It's the KT Sonic Boom hosting the LG Sakers in Busan. Now both teams dash out the gate, but it's KT with a 7-point edge at the half. Then it's all LG from there. Davon Jefferson explodes for 29 points in the second half to go with his 10 boards, and LG comes back to win 74-73. And ending off its action in the V-League, Uricard and Korean Air went heads up in Asan. Now they're both looking to rebound with a win. Now the first set falls to Korean Air, as does the second set in similar fashion. Now Uricard shows life in the third, but Korean Air closes it out and gets the win in straight sets. And that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
The first 2 days of the week here in Korea were bitterly cold, but temperatures eased up a bit today.
Right, and I hear tomorrow looks to be warmer. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, guys. The cold wave advisories were lifted earlier today, and tomorrow morning temps will jump about 4 degrees compared to today. Well, tomorrow snow showers are forecast throughout most of the southern regions. The mountains in Jeju, which are under a pre-heavy snowfall watch, could get up to 15 centimeters centimeters of snow, and other areas in Jeju will see between 5 to 30 millimeters of rain. Parts of Gangwon-do province will get between 1 to 5 centimeters of snow, and elsewhere down south between 1 to 3 centimeters. Currently, the southern regions are at the edge of a high pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies down south. Now, the snow showers will clear up by tomorrow afternoon, but will continue through late at night in Jeju. Otherwise, the dry weather warnings are still in effect in some regions, including Seoul, so make sure to keep yourselves hydrated. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul and Daegu make it to 4 degrees, while Busan peaks at 5. Moving on to other regions, rainy Jeju hits 8 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 1 and -5 degrees, respectively. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Yuji Hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.